5.5 minutes into the flight, the boosters started coming in hot. People had stepped outside just to watch it leave the ground, and they said the same thing afterward, that it was incredible that you could feel the launch before you understood it. Nobody was planning to bring the super heavy booster back to the tower this time. The plan was simpler: let it come down in the Gulf. There's a phrase that follows this company everywhere it goes: launch to learn, push the vehicle, break the vehicle, read what the wreckage tells you. But there's a strange problem buried inside that idea. What do you do when the thing you're supposed to learn from is a booster that never made it home? When the dust settled on the latest Starship V3 attempt, the internet split clean down the middle. Win or loss, triumph or disaster, people argued like it was one or the other. The company's president didn't bother joining that fight. She called it an incredible first flight and moved on. So let's move past the noise for a moment. Let's actually look at what happened in those final seconds and why the data pulled from that dying booster might be the reason humans reach Mars years ahead of anyone's schedule. But first, the obvious question: what actually happened to Booster 19? In the beginning, it looked like everything was going right. All 33 Raptor 3 engines lit on command, and the booster came off the pad with more violence than anything before it. You could see it. B-19 climbed harder, faster, and hit max Q, the moment of maximum aerodynamic stress, at 54 seconds, roughly 8 seconds quicker than the flight before it. The first crack appeared at 1 minute and 42 seconds. One of the outer ring Raptors shut down without warning. On its own, that shouldn't have ended anything. Super Heavy was built to lose engines and keep flying, and for a while that's exactly what it did. The booster shrugged off the failure like it was supposed to. The real trouble came later. After stage separation during the boost back burn, the flip looked clean, textbook even, but the moment the booster tried to relight its engines to turn for home, everything started to come apart. Several engines refused to reignite. B-19 lost its grip on its own flight path. Instead of the gentle, planned splashdown, it hit the water at roughly 1,450 kilometers an hour, far past anything that could be called survivable, then flipped and tore itself apart on impact. The company hasn't confirmed why, but there's a theory making the rounds among the people who watch this closely. It starts with that engine that died on the way up. The idea is that a single Raptor may have failed violently, throwing fire and pressure into the engines packed tightly around it. And because those engines sit so close together, the damage might have rippled outward, one failure feeding the next, until as many as 16 engines were gone. That detail matters. Super Heavy was designed to survive a lost engine here and there. The worry is that the new V3 layout might not have full blast shielding between the engines. If that's true, then a single failure doesn't stay a single failure, it spreads. Online, the reaction was sharp and divided. Some people looked at B-19 disintegrating in the Gulf and saw a program sliding backward, especially when you remember the company once caught a booster out of the sky with its own launch tower. After a milestone like that, watching a booster shatter on the water feels like regression. Others saw something completely different. To them, this flight was never about recovery. It was about taking an almost entirely new vehicle and dragging it to its limits to see what it could do. B-19 was basically a flying test stand. New plumbing, new thermal conditions, higher chamber pressures, more aggressive targets across the board. Seen that way, the booster blowing up isn't the story. The story is the mountain of data it sent back before it died. And it's hard to argue with that. V3 isn't a small upgrade, it's closer to an entirely new rocket wearing the silhouette of the old one. What really counts is that B-19 still finished its actual job, getting Ship 39 to space. And Ship 39, despite all the attention pointed at the booster, performed beautifully. It hit nearly every major objective and ended with a soft splashdown. That's why the company's president called it an incredible first flight of a brand new vehicle. In her message afterward, she thanked the team and acknowledged what they were really doing, building under conditions where failure isn't just possible, it's expected. It's part of the process. And honestly, that framing makes sense. This flight really did feel like the first flight of something fundamentally new. That becomes a lot clearer when you look back at the early V2 days, when almost every launch carried a real sense of dread. Back then, Starship was still fighting for basic survival. The first 3 V2 flights in early 2025 all ended early: propulsion failures, a major propellant leak, setbacks that interrupted the momentum the program had built through the increasingly successful flights of 2023 and 2024. Then in June, another V2 vehicle exploded during a ground test in Texas, and suddenly a program people thought was steady looked anything but. But what came next was one of the most valuable stretches of learning in the entire program. The company slowly pulled things back together. Flight 10 in August was the first full V2 mission to make it all the way to splashdown, and it became a goldmine especially for the heat shield. Engineers found that a new metallic tile design wasn't holding up the way they'd hoped. Parts of the vehicle came back with orange streaks of oxidation running down the stainless steel. But another experiment on that same ship gave them real hope. They'd started testing a soft insulating material, something to seal the tiny gaps between the ceramic tiles. Those sound trivial, but during re-entry they can become channels for plasma hot enough to eat through the steel underneath. On Flight 10, the material seemed to cut that risk dramatically. So for Flight 11, they expanded it across larger sections of the ship. The early signs were good. Through re-entry and splashdown, the vehicle held a much cleaner thermal profile than the V2 flights before it. The modifications were working, and that mission turned out to be one of the most complete Starship demonstrations yet. After reaching space, the ship shut down its 6 Raptors and coasted across the Atlantic and Africa before lining up for re-entry over the Indian Ocean. During the coast, it deployed 8 Starlink simulator payloads, stand-ins for the size and mass of the next-generation satellites built specifically for Starship's enormous payload bay. It even relit one of its Raptors in space, a short burn to fine-tune its re-entry path. Another box checked for future operational missions. By the time Flight 11 launched on October 13, it looked like the company was finally closing the roughest chapter in the program's history. The vehicle flew halfway around the world from South Texas to the Indian Ocean in what most people called a near-complete success. That's why a lot of observers now talk about the V2 era as the hard lessons phase, a stretch defined by repeated failure, but also by the kind of real-world data you simply cannot fake on the ground. V3 is meant to be something else entirely. It's about getting the vehicle ready for actual work, true orbital missions, large-scale payload deployment, propellant transfer in orbit, and eventually the foundation of a fully and rapidly reusable transportation system that could service Earth orbit, the Moon, Mars, and whatever comes after. The upgrades are serious: bigger propellant tanks for more payload, upgraded Raptor 3 engines, a redesigned payload section built to carry real, working Starlink satellites instead of test hardware. But the milestone that matters most is orbital refueling. V3 is supposed to host the program's first propellant transfer demonstrations in space, something the company has been chasing for years. That capability isn't optional. Without it, there's no way to push Starship beyond low Earth orbit, no long-duration missions to the Moon, no path to sending humans to Mars. And it isn't just the company waiting on this. Starship's lunar lander is a central piece of the Artemis program, and orbital refueling is one of the key technical requirements written into the NASA contract. As the Artemis timeline slips, the pressure to prove these capabilities only grows. But none of it begins until V3 can fly reliably and fly often. That's why Flight 12 matters, even with the loss of B-19. The mission hinted that the company might finally be crossing the line from fighting to survive into refining how it operates. If that trend holds, Flight 13 could be the first real shot at a longer orbital mission, one built to test how Starship endures over time in space. And beyond that sits one of the program's boldest goals of all: bringing an orbital Starship home and catching it out of the sky with the launch tower itself. That milestone might be closer than anyone expected. The plan was always to attempt a tower catch after 2 clean ship splashdowns in a row. Flights 11 and 12 just delivered exactly that.